She rolled her wheelchair straight into the middle of a live construction site. Hard hat designer suit. Red lips, and didn't flinch once when a steel beam swung 3 feet above her head. Every worker stopped. Every drill went silent. She looked up at the man on the scaffold and said loud enough for all of them to hear, "Ethan Turner, I need your DNA. Name your price." He stared down at her like she'd lost her mind. She hadn't. And that was only the beginning. What happened next between this single father and the most powerful woman in the city? Drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe and follow the channel because this story, you won't be able to stop once it starts. Ethan Turner had learned in the hardest way a man could learn anything that some mornings just hit different. Not in a good way. It was 6:14 a.m. on a Tuesday when Sophie's backpack strap snapped clean off the zipper and she burst into tears, the kind of full-body end-of-the-world tears that only 8-year-olds can produce over a broken backpack strap. And Ethan, still holding his untouched coffee, still wearing yesterday's flannel shirt, because he'd been too tired to find a clean one, did what he always did. He fixed it. Needle, thread. 3 minutes. Done. "There," he said, handing it back to her. "Good as new." Sophie sniffled, wiped her nose on her sleeve, and inspected his work with the kind of critical eye that reminded him so much of her mother it made his chest ache. Then she nodded. One firm, satisfied nod. "Okay," she said. "You're pretty good at that." "I build bridges for a living, Soph." "Backpacks are harder," she said seriously, and walked out the door. Ethan stood in the kitchen for a moment alone. The coffee was cold. The house was quiet again. A framed photo of his wife Claire sat on the windowsill, her hair wild in the wind, laughing at something off camera, the kind of laugh that used to fill every room she walked into. He picked up the cold coffee, drank it anyway. Then he grabbed his hard hat off the hook and went to work. The Maplewood Bridge expansion project had been Ethan's job for the past 14 months. Big contract, complicated structure, 3 different sub-teams, 2 union disputes, and 1 near disaster when a surveyor miscalculated a load-bearing column by 3 inches that would have eventually, quietly, catastrophically mattered. Ethan had caught it. Of course he had. He always caught it. That was the thing about Ethan Turner. He was the kind of engineer who didn't just read the blueprints. He felt the structure. He walked the site at 6 a.m. before anyone else arrived, running his hand along the rebar, listening for the things that didn't sound right. His crew chief Marcus called it the gift. His old professor had called it instinct. Ethan just called it paying attention. He was up on scaffold level 3 that morning, checking the tension bolts on the eastern support beam when he heard the commotion below. Voices. Then silence. The kind of sudden total silence that meant something had either broken or someone important had walked in. He looked down. A woman in a wheelchair was moving through the middle of his site like she owned it. And the way every single one of his workers was parting to let her through, not because she was in a wheelchair, but because of the way she carried herself, the way she looked at the space like it was already hers, made Ethan think she might actually believe that she did. She wore a charcoal gray suit jacket pressed sharp. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a way that looked both effortless and deliberate. She had a tablet in her lap, and she wasn't looking at it. She was looking up. Looking at him. Marcus appeared at the base of the scaffold, craning his neck upward. "Ethan, you've got a visitor." "I can see that." Ethan began climbing down. "Who is she?" "Olivia Cross." He stopped on the 3rd rung. Cross Industries. The one and only. Ethan climbed the rest of the way down slowly. He knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. Olivia Cross was the kind of person you read about in business sections, and Forbes covers the CEO who had rebuilt 3 failing companies from scratch, who sat on the boards of 2 hospital systems, and a national infrastructure fund, who had started Cross Industries at 31 years old, from a single office with a second-hand desk. and turned it into something that touched nearly every major construction and development project in the region. She was also, if the gossip was accurate, almost impossible to get a meeting with. Her assistant had a reputation for being colder than a January lake. So what she was doing on his site in person unannounced on a Tuesday morning, Ethan had absolutely no idea. She stopped her wheelchair about 6 feet from him. She was closer to 50 than 40, he guessed, though she wore it the way some women do not. Fighting it, not performing it, just inhabiting it with a kind of quiet authority. Her eyes were dark and direct, and they didn't waver when she looked at him. "Mr. Turner," she said. Not a question, a confirmation. "Ms. Cross." He didn't take off his hard hat. "You're on a live site. You need—" "I have a hard hat." She gestured to the safety helmet balanced on the edge of her wheelchair armrest. "My assistant checked the site protocols before we arrived. I'm in compliance." He blinked. "Your assistant?" "She's waiting at the perimeter. I told her this was a private conversation." Ethan looked around. His entire crew was doing that thing where they were very obviously trying not to watch. He turned back to Olivia Cross. "I'm in the middle of a structural inspection," he said. "I know. I'll be brief." She folded her hands on the tablet in her lap. "I want to make you an offer, Mr. Turner. A business offer. I'd prefer to discuss it somewhere with less audience, but given that you seem reluctant to move, I'm comfortable having this conversation here." He crossed his arms. "I'm listening." She looked at him for a moment, not assessing him the way a business person sizes up a contract. Something else. Something more careful. Then she said, "I want you to father a child for me." The sound of drilling somewhere on the far end of the site suddenly seemed very loud. Ethan didn't move. "I'm sorry. I've been researching viable candidates for approximately 8 months. Olivia said, her voice completely unnervingly steady. The criteria were specific: health history, professional track record, intellectual profile, emotional stability, absence of substance issues. You ranked at the top of the list. I've spoken to 2 attorneys and a fertility specialist. The arrangement would be contractual, compensated, and fully confidential. You would have no legal obligations to any child born from the arrangement, and I would have no claim on you personally or professionally. It's clean, Mr. Turner. It's simple." He stared at her. She stared back. "Are you serious right now?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I don't make unserious trips to construction sites." Ethan turned away from her. He walked 3 steps, stopped, turned back. "You ranked me," he said. "You were first," she said, as if this was a compliment. "Ms. Cross." He stopped. Started over. I can't." Another stop. He pressed his fingers to his forehead. "No, that's my answer. No, absolutely not." Something moved across her face. It was quick and she shut it down fast, but he caught it. A flash of something that was not calculation and not composure. Something raw and quickly buried. "I expected hesitation," she said. "I have materials prepared." "I'm not hesitating. I'm refusing." He kept his voice low, professional. "I have a daughter. I have a full life. And I don't know what kind of men you've been meeting, but I am not a transaction." She held his gaze. "Everything is a transaction, Mr. Turner. The only difference is whether people are honest about it." "That's a very sad way to live," he said. And there it was again, that flash, gone in a half-second. But real. Olivia Cross pressed her lips together. Then she nodded once. "I'll leave my card with your crew chief," she said, "in case you change your mind." "I won't." She turned her chair. She was halfway to the perimeter when he called after her, not because he'd changed his mind, but because something about that flash wouldn't leave him alone. "Why me?" he said. "Specifically, there are fertility clinics. There are donors. Why come to a job site and ask a man you've never met?" She stopped. Didn't turn around. Her voice when it came was quieter than it had been for the entire conversation. "Because I've tried the other ways," she said, "and they didn't work." Then she kept going. Her assistant materialized at the perimeter and fell into step alongside her, and Ethan watched Olivia Cross roll out of his sight and into a waiting black SUV with tinted windows, and the door closed, and she was gone. Marcus appeared at his elbow. "Well," he said, "that was something." "Don't," said Ethan. "I wasn't going to say a word." "Good. She's worth about $3 billion, though, just for context." "Marcus." "Gone," said Marcus and walked away. He didn't think about her card. He told himself he didn't think about it. He picked Sophie up from school at 3:45, listened to a 12-minute monologue about why her teacher, Mr. Alvarez, was wrong about the water cycle, helped her with her math homework, made grilled cheese and tomato soup for dinner, because it was her favorite, and because he was tired, and read her 2 chapters of the book they were working through together before she fell asleep. Then he sat at the kitchen table in the quiet, and he thought about Olivia Cross. Not the offer, not the money, the flash. He'd worked construction for 20 years. He could read a structure, know where the stress was, know where the fracture was most likely to form. He'd gotten very good over those same 20 years at reading people the same way. And what he'd seen in Olivia Cross's face in that half-second she let something through, it wasn't arrogance, it wasn't cold calculation, it was grief. Old, well-managed, very private grief. The kind a person carries so long, they forget that other people can't see it because they've stopped looking for it themselves. He knew what that looked like. He saw it every morning in the mirror. He didn't call. He wasn't going to call. But he reached into his jacket pocket, and he set the card on the kitchen table, and he looked at it for a while before he went to bed. She called him first. 3 days later. 8:30 in the morning. Unknown number, but the voice was unmistakable. "Mr. Turner, this is Olivia Cross." He was in his truck, parked outside the site. He almost didn't answer. "Ms. Cross? I owe you an apology," she said. The way I presented my proposal was a pause. The words seemed to cost her something. Reductive. I reduced a significant and deeply personal situation to a business transaction because that's the only language I'm comfortable speaking. That wasn't fair to you. He waited. "I'm not calling to renegotiate the offer," she said quickly. "I'm calling because you asked me a question I gave you a non-answer to, and I've spent 3 days being bothered by that." "Which question?" "Why you, specifically." Another pause. "I told you I'd tried the other ways." "That's true. But it's not the complete answer." Ethan put his elbow on the window and watched a pigeon walk across the roof of the site trailer. "What's the rest of it?" "I found your name through a mutual professional contact 8 months ago, and before I added you to the candidate list, I did what I do with everything I researched. I found the piece the City Engineering Association ran about the Maplewood inspection, the 3-inch error you caught. I found the safety record for your site. I found the letter your daughter's school sent home commending parental involvement. It was in a community newsletter publicly available." A brief pause. "I found your wife's obituary." He went very still. "I'm sorry," she said, and it sounded like she meant it. "I know that's a violation. I didn't intend to. I just need to understand the people I work with. But that's not what's relevant. What's relevant is that after everything I read, I didn't see a candidate. I saw a person. A specific kind of person. The kind who stays. The kind who doesn't leave when things are hard." Her voice was very controlled, but the seams were starting to show. "That's rarer than you would think. And I can't offer a child a world where the other half of their origin is just a biological file number. I couldn't do that to a child. Not after everything." "After everything what?" Ethan said. The silence stretched. He heard her exhale. "I've had 4 miscarriages," she said. "In 6 years. The last one was 18 months ago. The doctors have told me the probability of carrying to term naturally is below 5%. I've done every intervention there is. Everyone." Her voice was steady, but just barely. "I'm 44 years old, Mr. Turner, and I'm running out of time, and I know it, and I am not a person who accepts running out of time. But this is the one thing in my life that is entirely outside my control, and She stopped. Ethan waited. "I handled it wrong," she said finally. "Coming to your site like that. I know how it looked. I know what you must have thought of me." "What did you think I thought?" "That I was arrogant, delusional, a woman who believes she can purchase anything." He considered that. "I thought you were desperate," he said, "and that you were terrified of it." A very long silence. "I have to go," she said. "I have a board meeting in 40 minutes. Ms. Cross." "Yes." "Coffee," he said. "Not a meeting, not a negotiation, just coffee. I'll come to wherever you are, or you tell me where, and we talk like two people who have both been through things. That's it." Another long pause. "Why?" she said. He watched the pigeon fly off the trailer roof. "Because you called to apologize when you didn't have to," he said. "And because you're not as scary as you think you are." She said nothing for a moment, then very quietly, "Thursday, 10 a.m. There's a coffee shop on Meridian called Groundwork. I'll be there." "I'll be there," he said. "Mr. Turner." "Ethan." A pause. "Ethan." She said it like she was testing the weight of it. "Don't misunderstand this. I know what it isn't," he said. Thursday. He hung up before she could overthink it. He sat in his truck for another minute, watching the crew file onto the site. He hadn't agreed to anything. He hadn't changed his mind about anything. He had simply made a decision that two people who were both carrying something heavy ought to at least be allowed to sit across from each other and be honest about the weight. That was all. He told himself that was all. Then he got out of the truck, put on his hard hat, and went to inspect the eastern support column, which still needed 3 more tension checks before he'd be satisfied it would hold. He was good at knowing what would hold. He wasn't always as sure about himself. Groundwork was the kind of coffee shop that didn't try too hard. Exposed brick mismatched chairs, the smell of dark roast so thick you could almost chew it. Ethan got there at 9:52, ordered a black coffee, and picked a table near the window. Not because he wanted the view, but because it had the most space around it, and he figured a woman who moved through the world in a wheelchair had probably spent enough of her life navigating chairs, shoved too close together. He sat down. He drank his coffee. He watched the door. She came in at exactly 10 o'clock. Not 10:01, not 9:59. 10 o'clock on the second, as if she had timed the drive to arrive at the precise moment she'd committed to. Her assistant, a compact, efficient-looking woman in her 30s, held the door and then hung back near the entrance without being asked. Olivia Cross navigated the space between tables with the kind of practiced ease that told him she'd long since stopped waiting for people to move things for her. She just found the line through. She spotted him, crossed to the table, looked at the chair he'd already moved aside to make room, and for a split second, just a flicker, something crossed her face. Not quite surprise, something quieter. "You moved the chair," she said. "Seemed practical," he said. She settled herself at the table. She had traded the sharp charcoal suit for something slightly softer, still professional, still put together, but the jacket was a deep navy, and she wasn't wearing the armor quite as visibly today. She set her phone face down on the table. "You're on time," she said. "I said I'd be here. People say a lot of things." A server came over. Olivia ordered an Americano, no sugar, and then folded her hands on the table and looked at him directly. "So," she said, "we're having coffee." "We're having coffee," he agreed. "I want to establish something before we start," she said. "I didn't come here to repitch the arrangement. I meant what I said on the phone. This is—" She paused as if searching for a word she wasn't entirely comfortable with. "This is outside the arrangement." "I understood that." "Good. She looked at the window briefly, then back. I'm not very good at this. At what? Talking to people without an agenda. He almost smiled. Most people aren't. Most people fake it better. That's true, he said. So let's not fake it. She looked at him like she was trying to determine if that was a trap. Then she said, All right, ask me something real. He thought about it. Then, when did you stop believing someone would stay? The server set down her Americano. She didn't reach for it. She kept looking at him, and for a long moment he thought she was going to shut it down entirely, pull the professional mask back up and redirect. Instead, she said, I was 29. I'd been with someone for 3 years. Good man or so, I thought. Smart, ambitious. We were building something together, a life, a business partnership, all of it blended. And then I had my accident. She said the last 2 words the way people say words they've said so many times. They've stripped them down to just their shape. 6 weeks in the hospital, 2 surgeries, another 6 months of rehab, and he was gone by month 3. He didn't leave dramatically. He just reduced, visited less, called less. And then one day I realized I hadn't heard from him in 11 days, and I wasn't even surprised. A beat. That was the day I decided that needing people was a liability I couldn't afford. Ethan held his coffee cup in both hands. And you've run that way ever since. I've run everything that way ever since, she said. Business, staff, personal life. Anything that could hurt me was converted into something I could manage. Something with terms. And the baby, he said. That was the same logic. She held his gaze. Yes. Except it wasn't working. Her jaw tightened slightly. No, it wasn't. He set his cup down. Can I tell you something without you reading it as criticism? You can try. You came to my site and made me a business offer, he said. But the way you looked when I said no, that wasn't the face of a CEO who lost a contract. That was the face of a person who was terrified they'd run out of options. He paused. That's not a business problem, Olivia. That's a loneliness problem. The name landed between them. She hadn't told him to use it, but she didn't flinch. She picked up her Americano and took a slow sip, and he could see her deciding how much of herself to leave exposed. I know what it is, she said finally. I'm not confused about what it is. I'm just... She exhaled. I'm not built for the alternative. What's the alternative? Needing someone, she said like it was a foreign phrase she'd memorized without understanding the language. Actually needing them, letting them see the parts of me that... She stopped. I built everything I have on being the person who doesn't fall apart. If I start letting people in, I don't know who I am on the other side of that. You're still you, he said, just with better company. She looked at him for a long moment. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. I just know what it looks like from the other side. He turned the coffee cup slowly in his hands. My wife died 4 years ago. Claire, aneurysm. She was 39 years old and she was perfectly healthy, and she was there in the morning, and she wasn't by afternoon, and that was it. No warning, no chance to prepare, no slow goodbye. He said it evenly the way you say things you've carried long enough that the weight is familiar. And after that, I did exactly what you did. I reduced. I converted everything into something manageable. Work, Sophie, the house, the routine. I built walls and I called them structure, and I told myself I was being responsible. Maybe you were, she said quietly. Maybe. But Sophie's 8 years old and she talks more about her stuffed elephant than she talks about having someone around. And I think she started to understand that Daddy doesn't do that anymore. He let that sit for a second. That's not protection. That's just loneliness with better architecture. Olivia Cross looked at him for a long moment with something in her expression that he couldn't quite name. Not pity, not recognition exactly. Something between the two and below both. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Someone easier to dismiss. He did smile then, just slightly. Sorry to disappoint. You're not disappointing. She said it carefully, like she was measuring each word before she released it. That's the problem. They sat with that for a moment, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that happens between two people who have just said something real and are letting it settle. Then she said, "Tell me about Sophie." And he did. He talked about Sophie the way he rarely let himself talk about her, not just the logistics of raising an 8-year-old alone, not just the schedules and the homework and the broken backpack straps, but Sophie herself. The way she argued about the water cycle with a conviction that would terrify a courtroom. The way she cried over his mending stitches and then called him a genius 30 seconds later. The way she had Claire's laugh but Ethan's stubbornness, and how sometimes that combination stopped him cold because it was so specifically, painfully, wonderfully hers. Olivia listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't check her phone. She just listened with her hands wrapped around her Americano and her eyes steady on his face, and he got the sense that she was collecting each detail with a kind of careful reverence, like she understood she was being given access to something rare. When he finished, she said, "She sounds extraordinary." "She is," he said. "She really is." "You light up when you talk about her," she said, and she said it with the particular gentleness of someone who doesn't say gentle things very often. "She's the best thing I've ever built," he said. Then he looked at Olivia. "That's why I said no. Not because I thought you were a bad person, because I know what it means to bring a life into the world, and I know it can't be a contract. A child isn't a structure, Olivia. You can't engineer the load-bearing points." She was quiet for a moment, then very quietly, "No, you can't." A pause. "I think I knew that. I think I've known that for a while. I just didn't have a better answer, and I'm not accustomed to not having answers." "What do you actually want?" he said. "Not the offer, not the strategy. If you took all the legal frameworks away, all the compensation and the terms and the arrangements, what do you actually want?" She looked at him, her hands stilled around her cup, and he watched the careful architecture of her expression do something he hadn't seen yet. Not crack exactly, but soften. Like a building, not collapsing, but settling, finding its true position. "I want to matter to someone," she said. "I want a child to exist in the world who needs me. Not my company, not my resources, not my professional connections. Me. And I want—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I want not to eat dinner alone every night in a penthouse that I designed to impress people I don't particularly like." She let out a short, humorless breath. "There. That's what's behind the $3 billion operation." "Dinner." He looked at her. "That's the most honest thing I've heard anyone say in a long time." "Don't tell my board," she said. He laughed, a real one, and it surprised her he could see it in the way her expression shifted, the slight widening of her eyes, like she'd been expecting something more measured from him, and the laugh threw her off balance in a way she didn't mind. She almost smiled. It was small and brief, and she seemed to catch it before it fully formed, but it was there. "I have a question," she said. "Ask it." "Why are you being kind to me?" She said it without self-pity, just direct curiosity. "I showed up on your job site and said something genuinely inappropriate. You owe me nothing. Most men would have told their crew chief to have me escorted out, and that would have been the end of it." He thought about that for a moment. "Because you reminded me of someone," he said. "Who?" "Me," he said. 3 years ago. When I was so used to managing everything that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be, to not be solving something." He looked at her directly. "You came to my site looking for a solution. But I don't think a solution is what you need." She held his gaze. Her voice, when it came, was barely above steady. "What do you think I need?" "Someone to have coffee with," he said simply. "Without an agenda." She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "I've finished my Americano." "I noticed. The server will probably want the table back soon." "Probably." A pause. "I have a 3 o'clock call with my legal team and a 6 o'clock dinner with 2 board members I tolerate at best." "That sounds like a miserable evening," he said. "It generally is." She glanced out the window, then back. "I could move the 6 o'clock." He studied her. "You could. There's a Thai place 2 blocks from here that has outdoor seating and a decent pad Thai. Sophie eats Thai food." He raised his eyebrows slightly. "You want to bring Sophie?" "I want to—" She stopped. Reset. "I am extending an invitation to dinner, to both of you, as a—" She paused on the word. "As something that is not a business meeting." He could see what it cost her to say that. To extend something without a safety net underneath it, without terms and clauses and exits pre-planned. He recognized it because he knew exactly how high those walls were, and how much effort it took to even stand at the top of them and consider looking down the other side. "I'll ask Sophie," he said. "She makes her own decisions about people." "That's—" Olivia looked momentarily caught off guard. "That's fair. If she says yes, we'll be there at 6:30. And if she says no—" He gathered his jacket from the back of the chair. "Then you and I will have coffee again next week, and you can try harder to impress her from a distance." Olivia Cross looked at him with an expression he was starting to recognize, the one where she was calculating and feeling things simultaneously, and wasn't sure which one to lead with. "You're a strange man, Ethan Turner," she said. "I build bridges," he said. "Strange is kind of the job." He left a 20 on the table and walked out, and he didn't look back, but he knew she was watching him go. He also knew that Sophie, when he asked her that afternoon, when he said casually, just between the end of school and the start of homework, "Hey Soph, how do you feel about Thai food tonight? There's someone I want you to meet." Sophie would look up at him with those eyes that saw everything, and she would ask exactly one question before answering. She asked, "Is she nice?" He thought about Olivia Cross at 29, watching someone she trusted reduce and disappear. He thought about her on his construction site, jaw set, voice, even eyes, giving everything away for 1/2 second before she locked it back down. He thought about her saying, "I want to matter to someone," like it was a confession she'd never intended to make out loud. "She's trying to be," he said. "That counts." Sophie considered this with the gravity of a federal judge. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "But if she's boring, I'm ordering the mango sticky rice and reading my book." "Deal," said Ethan. He texted Olivia one word, 6:30. Her reply came back in under a minute, confirmed. And then, after a pause of about 40 seconds, a second message, "Thank you." He looked at those 2 words for a moment longer than he needed to. Then he put his phone in his pocket and went to help Sophie with her math homework, which she was already convinced was wrong, and which she was in fact completely right about. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table again. Same chair, same quiet. He looked at Claire's photo on the windowsill. He didn't feel guilty exactly. It was something more complicated than guilt. It was the particular vertigo of realizing that the heart-stubborn, survival-oriented thing that it is had started paying attention to something again without asking permission. He hadn't meant for that to happen. He'd just moved a chair and ordered a black coffee and listened to a woman say honest things, and somehow that had been enough to shift something that had been fixed in place for 4 years. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said to the photograph. He said it quietly, not because he thought Claire would answer, but because the house was quiet enough that saying it out loud made it real. The photo didn't answer. The photograph just smiled the way it always had, wild hair, the laugh, the light. He took that as permission. Or maybe he took it as something better. The simple, solid understanding that love, when it was real, didn't diminish by being given again. It was not a finite material. It was not load-bearing in that way. He went to bed. He set his alarm for 5:45, and he lay in the dark, and he thought about the next day's inspection schedule, and a woman who ordered Americanos without sugar and said thank you, like she'd had to practice it, and the way his daughter had said that counts like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Maybe it was, he thought. Maybe it really was that simple. The people who were trying deserved to be met halfway. He was asleep by 10:30, and he slept better than he had in a long time. The Thai place was called Lotus Garden, and it was the kind of restaurant that had been there so long, it had become part of the neighborhood's bones. The kind of place where the owner knew your order before you sat down, and the menus were laminated and slightly sticky, and nobody cared because the food was that good. Ethan and Sophie arrived at 6:28. Sophie was wearing her green soccer jersey because she'd had practice, and Ethan had forgotten to pack a change of clothes, and she'd announced in the car that if this woman was the kind of person who cared about what an 8-year-old wore to dinner, then she was already not her favorite person. "She's not going to care," Ethan said. "How do you know?" "Because she's got more important things to think about." Sophie considered this. What kind of things? Grown-up things. That's what adults say when they don't want to explain. "Correct," said Ethan, and opened the restaurant door. Olivia was already there. She'd taken a table near the far wall, not the one by the window, which would have been harder to navigate, and she was sitting with her phone down, and her hands folded, and she looked up when they came in with an expression that Ethan could only describe as carefully composed. She'd prepared for this the way she prepared for everything. He could see it, in the straightness of her posture, the measured way she tracked them crossing the room. What she hadn't prepared for, apparently, was Sophie. Sophie walked up to the table, looked at Olivia Cross with the frank, unfiltered assessment that only children can get away with, and said, "Your wheelchair is really cool. Is that carbon fiber on the frame?" A beat of silence. Olivia blinked, then slowly she looked down at the chair's side panel, then back up at Sophie. "It is, actually. How do you know what carbon fiber looks like?" "My dad works in construction," Sophie said, pulling out the chair across from Olivia and climbing into it. "He explains materials to me. He says understanding what things are made of is how you understand whether they'll hold." She picked up the laminated menu and examined it with the same seriousness she'd applied to Olivia. "Do you like pad thai? Or do you like the noodles with the peanut sauce? Because the pad thai here is better, but Dad always gets the noodles with the peanut sauce because he's boring." "I'm not boring," Ethan said, sitting down. "I'm consistent." "Same thing," said Sophie. Olivia Cross was looking at Sophie with an expression Ethan had never seen on her before, something open and unguarded and slightly undone the way a person looks when they've been caught off guard by something that reached past all their defenses before they even knew it was coming. "I think I'll try the pad thai," Olivia said, "since you recommend it." Sophie nodded with great satisfaction. "Good choice." She went back to studying the menu. "They also have mango sticky rice. I'm getting that no matter what." "Then I'll have that too," Olivia said. Sophie looked up. "You don't have to get it just because I'm getting it." "I'm not," Olivia said. "I actually love mango sticky rice. I just never order it at business dinners because I can't eat it without making a mess, and I don't like people seeing me make a mess." Sophie stared at her for a second. Then she grinned the full, uncontained, slightly gap-toothed grin that Ethan lived for. "Me neither," she said. "We can both make a mess tonight." And just like that, Olivia Cross, CEO of a $3 billion company woman who had walked out of 6-figure boardrooms without a visible heartbeat, was disarmed by an 8-year-old in a soccer jersey. Ethan picked up his menu and said nothing. But he felt something in his chest unknot by about 2 turns. Dinner was not a business meeting. It was not a transaction. It was Sophie telling Olivia about the water cycle debate with Mr. Alvarez in such passionate detail that Olivia actually pulled up a meteorological reference on her phone and showed Sophie a diagram that proved conclusively that Sophie was right, and Mr. Alvarez had oversimplified the condensation phase. Sophie received this information with the vindication of someone who had been waiting for justice. "Can I screenshot that?" Sophie asked. "You can have my email address and I'll send you the full article," Olivia said. Sophie looked at Ethan. Ethan raised his eyebrows in a way that meant your call. Sophie looked back at Olivia with measuring eyes. "Okay," she said, "but only because you helped me win an argument." "That's the only good reason to exchange contact information," Olivia said completely seriously. Sophie appeared to find this philosophically correct. She gave Olivia her father's email address to send it to, and then returned to her pad thai, which she was eating with a level of focus and commitment that Ethan recognized as her highest form of approval. Olivia met his eyes across the table. He struggled to find the word for it. Not happy exactly. That seemed too light. More like something that had been wound very tight for a very long time, had for the space of this dinner been allowed to simply rest. She looked like she was breathing. He reached across and refilled her water glass from the pitcher on the table, and she said a quiet thank you that was different from the thank you she'd sent in the text message, less practiced, more real. He nodded and went back to his peanut noodles, which Sophie was correct about probably. The mango sticky rice arrived, and both Sophie and Olivia made a mess of it, and neither of them seemed to mind. But the evening didn't stay light. It couldn't, because nothing between people who are carrying real weight ever stays light for long. It shifted gradually, naturally, the way conversations do when the food is mostly gone, and the table is easy, and the guards have come down a few inches. Sophie had gone to the bathroom when Olivia said, "She looks like you." "She looks like her mother," Ethan said. "Mostly. She has my stubbornness, apparently." "You're not stubborn," Olivia said. "You're deliberate. There's a difference. You've known me for a week." "I read people quickly." She folded her napkin with the automatic precision of someone whose hands needed something to do. "It's what I do well." A pause. "What was she like, Claire?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at the condensation ring his water glass had left on the table. "Loud," he said finally. "Not in a bad way. She just filled spaces. She'd walk into a room and within 10 minutes, she'd know 3 people's names and their kids' names and what they were worried about. She remembered everything. She sent birthday texts to people she'd met once at a party." He traced the edge of the condensation ring with one finger. "She used to say that people were the most interesting architecture there was, that every person was a structure you could spend a lifetime learning." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "She sounds like someone who would have been very difficult to live up to." "She never made me feel like I had to," he said. "That was the thing. Some people you feel like you have to perform for. Claire just made room. She was very good at making room for people exactly as they were." He looked up. Sophie got that from her. Olivia nodded slowly. "Then, do you feel guilty when you're here with me?" It was a direct question. He respected that about her. Even when the question cost something, she asked it straight. "A little," he said. "Not because I think it's wrong, just because he thought about how to say it. It's like living in a house for a long time and rearranging the furniture. The room is the same. The furniture is the same. But the arrangement feels different, and you keep catching yourself expecting things to be where they used to be." Olivia looked at him steadily. "I've been trying to figure out what to do with you," she said. "With me. With this." She gestured between them slightly. "Whatever this is, it doesn't fit any category I have. You're not a business contact. You're not a contract. You're not—" She paused. "You're not a complication I can manage by converting you into something with terms." "Good," he said. "It's not good," she said. "It's destabilizing." "Also good," he said. She looked at him like she wanted to argue with that and couldn't find the angle. "Ethan." "Olivia. I'm serious." "So am I." He leaned forward slightly. "You've spent 15 years building a life where nothing can destabilize you. How's that going?" She held his gaze. "You know how it's going." "Yeah," he said. "I do." Sophie came back from the bathroom, slid back into her seat, and looked between the two of them, with the sharp, quiet attention of a child who has learned to read rooms. "Did I miss something?" We were talking about architecture, Ethan said. Sophie looked at Olivia. Are you okay? Olivia Cross blinked. Then, to her visible surprise, she said, Yes, I think I am. Okay, Sophie said, and picked up her spoon for the last of the mango sticky rice. They walked out together at 8:15. Sophie was on Ethan's left, holding his hand with the easy familiarity of a kid who'd done it 10,000 times. Olivia was on his right. The evening had gone cool, and the streetlights were on, and for a moment they just stood there on the sidewalk. The three of them in that particular pause that happens when nobody wants to be the first one to say goodnight. Sophie looked up at Olivia. Will you come to my soccer game? She said. Next Saturday. We play at 11. Ethan looked down at his daughter. She hadn't asked him first. She hadn't looked to him for permission. She had simply decided. Olivia's assistant had materialized near the SUV patient as ever. Olivia didn't look at her. She looked at Sophie. What position do you play? She said. Center mid, said Sophie. I'm not the fastest, but I'm the best at reading the field. Like your father reads structures, Olivia said. Sophie thought about that. Yeah, kind of exactly like that. She squeezed Ethan's hand. So will you come? Yes, Olivia said. It came out without a pause, without calculation, without the measured consideration she applied to everything. Just yes, clear and direct, like it had been waiting to be said. Sophie nodded like this was settled. Okay, I'll try to score one for you. She looked at Ethan. Can we go home? I'm tired, and I want to tell Mr. Alvarez about the water cycle tomorrow, and I need to sleep first, so I can be mean about it nicely. Sure, bud, Ethan said. He looked at Olivia. She was watching Sophie with that expression again, open unguarded, the armor completely off, in a way he didn't think she even noticed. He said quietly, Thank you. For tonight. Thank you, she said. For... She stopped. For bringing her. He nodded. Then, Good night, Olivia. Good night, Ethan. He walked Sophie to the car. He buckled her in, and she was half asleep by the time he got around to the driver's side. He looked in the rear-view mirror as he pulled out, and he caught a glimpse of the black SUV still parked at the curb, not yet moving, and he thought about Olivia sitting in the back seat of that car on the way home to her penthouse, and her quiet and her deliberate engineered life. He hoped she was okay. He hoped that in some small, not yet nameable way, tonight had made a dent in the loneliness of it. He thought it probably had. What he didn't know yet, what was still 3 days away, was that the dent would go both ways. That the thing quietly cracking open between them was not a one-directional current. That Olivia Cross in the back seat of her car on the way home was not simply processing the evening the way she processed board reports and quarterly projections. She was sitting very still with her hands in her lap, and she was thinking about a little girl in a soccer jersey who had said, "We can both make a mess tonight," like it was the most natural thing in the world, and she was thinking about the way Ethan Turner had refilled her water glass without being asked and without making a thing of it, and she was thinking with the slow, unnerving clarity of someone who has spent years avoiding exactly this kind of realization that she was in serious trouble. She had told herself she could manage this. She had told herself that a cup of coffee and a dinner were contained controllable encounters that she could exit cleanly if needed. She had told herself that Ethan Turner was simply an interesting person she had misjudged and was now correcting the record on the way she corrected any miscalculation efficiently, rationally, without residual effect. She had been wrong about that. She was almost never wrong, and she had been wrong about that. Her assistant Dana said nothing the entire drive. Dana had worked for Olivia for 6 years and had learned with professional precision which silences required management and which required simple respect. This was a respect silence. She kept her eyes forward and let Olivia sit with whatever she was sitting with. When they pulled up to the building, Dana said only, "Do you need anything tonight?" "No," Olivia said. "Thank you, Dana. Go home." "Good night, Ms. Cross." She went up to the penthouse alone. The lights came on automatically, smart system, the right brightness, the right temperature, everything calibrated to her specifications. The city spread out behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, and it was beautiful, the way things that are designed to impress are beautiful completely and without warmth. She went to her desk, and she sat down. She opened her laptop. She had 14 unread emails and a contract revision to review and a briefing document for Monday's board call. She looked at all of it. She closed the laptop. She sat in the perfect, climate-controlled, impeccably designed quiet of her penthouse, and she admitted to herself and nobody else that she did not want to be there. That what she wanted, what she had wanted, she was beginning to understand for far longer than 8 months of candidate research, was something that no contract could deliver and no compensation could replace. She wanted to matter to someone the way Sophie mattered to Ethan. Not because of what she provided or what she could do, but because she existed and she was hers, and the whole weight of her presence in the world was precious to him simply because she was. She wanted, she realized, to be someone's Sophie. That thought hit her with such unexpected force that she had to set her hands flat on the desk to steady herself. Because it was so simple. So embarrassingly, painfully simple. After all the medical consultations and the legal frameworks and the candidate rankings and the cost-benefit analyses, after all of it, what she actually needed wasn't a solution at all. It was to stop being afraid. She picked up her phone. She looked at the text thread, one-word exchanges, clean and minimal, the way she communicated everything. She looked at 6:30 and confirmed, and thank you. And the way even those small words had taken something to type, the way even that much honesty had felt like standing at the edge of something high. She typed, "Sophie is extraordinary. You've done something remarkable with her." She looked at it for a long time before she sent it. His reply came 11 minutes later, late enough that she thought he'd been putting Sophie to bed. She'd say she did it herself. She might be right. She read that twice. Then she typed Ethan. "I need to tell you something." A pause. Then, "Tell me." She held the phone. She thought about 15 years of converting need into strategy. She thought about the look on his face when she'd said, "I want to matter to someone," the way he hadn't flinched from it or tried to fix it, had just received it like it was something worth receiving. She typed, "I don't know how to do this. Whatever this is. I don't have a protocol for it, and that terrifies me. And I think you should know that, because I'm not going to pretend it doesn't." The longest pause yet. She counted 17 seconds. "I know," he wrote. "I'm terrified too. I think that's probably right." She read that 3 times. "Get some sleep," he sent a moment later. "The soccer game is Saturday at 11, and I'm told you promised a goal." She almost laughed. It caught her completely off guard, that almost laugh, the way it rose up before she could make a decision about it. She pressed her lips together and looked at the city through the windows. She typed back, "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Olivia." She set her phone down and looked at the desk surface in the quiet of her perfectly designed, deeply impersonal home. And she let herself feel, just for a moment, the specific and unfamiliar warmth of knowing that somewhere on the other side of this city, someone was thinking about her. Not about what she was worth, or what she could do, or what she could produce. Just her. It was, she thought, the most significant return on investment she had experienced in 15 years of business. She went to bed. She did not review the contract revision. She did not read the briefing document. She set her alarm for 7, turned off the bedside lamp, and lay in the dark in her enormous silent penthouse apartment. And she felt carefully, cautiously, with every instinct she owned, screaming at her to be careful, the first edge of something that might, if she was brave enough to let it become hope. Saturday came in gray and cool, the kind of October morning that couldn't decide whether it wanted to be autumn or just a long, tired version of summer's end. The soccer fields at Riverside Park were wet from an overnight drizzle, and the parents on the sideline were doing that thing where everyone pretended they weren't cold while clearly being cold, arms crossed, coffees, clutched, breath coming out in small, visible clouds. Ethan got there at 10:40, with Sophie already in her cleats and shin guards, bouncing with the specific barely contained energy of a kid who had been awake since 6, thinking about this game. He found a spot on the sideline, set up the small folding camp chair he always brought, and watched Sophie jog out to join her team. He didn't look for Olivia right away. He'd told himself he wasn't going to do that scan the sideline the way you scan a room when you're expecting someone, and you don't want to admit you're expecting them. He lasted about 4 minutes. She was there, 20 feet to his left, positioned at the edge of the grass where the ground was firmest. Dana standing a respectful distance behind her. She was wearing a dark jacket and had a thermos in her lap, and she was watching the field with the same focused attention she probably gave quarterly earnings calls. When she saw him looking, she didn't wave. She just held his gaze for a moment, and he could see in it the echo of their last text exchange. "I don't have a protocol for this, and that terrifies me, and the fact that she had come anyway." He picked up his chair and moved it 20 feet to the left. "You came," he said. "I said I would." "I know." He set the chair down and sat. "How are you?" "Cold," she said. "I didn't account for the temperature differential between the penthouse and an outdoor soccer field at 10:40 in the morning. There's a coffee cart by the parking lot. Dana already went." She said it without looking away from the field where Sophie's team was doing warm-up laps. "Which one is she?" "Green jersey number 7. She'll be the one telling the other kids what to do before the whistle blows." A short pause. Then, "There she is." They watched Sophie gather 3 teammates in a huddle, gesturing with her hands in a way that was so specifically genetically Ethan that he almost laughed out loud. "She's giving them a pre-game strategy," Olivia said. "She does this every time. Coach has stopped trying to intervene." "Smart coach." Dana returned with a coffee that she handed to Ethan without being asked, which surprised him, and Olivia shot him a look that said, "I told her you'd need one." He nodded a thank you at Dana, who retreated back to her position with the smooth efficiency of someone who had long since mastered the art of being necessary without being intrusive. "You told her to get me a coffee," Ethan said. "I told her to get you a coffee if you didn't have one," Olivia said. "You didn't. You noticed I didn't have one from 20 feet away. I'm observant." A pause. "Also, I've been here for 20 minutes, and I was watching the parking lot." He looked at her. She didn't look at him. Her jaw was set with the particular stubbornness of someone who has just admitted more than they intended to and is refusing to be embarrassed about it. He faced the field. "I was watching the lot too," he said. "For the record." She said nothing, but her hands wrapped around the thermos in her lap relaxed slightly. The whistle blew. The game started. For the next 40 minutes, something happened that Ethan could not have predicted and would not have engineered because the best things never are. Olivia Cross watched an 8-year-old play soccer and fell completely, irrevocably, helplessly in love with her. Not in any dramatic way. Not with a declaration or a turning point. It happened in small, accumulating moments, the way Sophie drove through a gap in the defense that nobody else on the field had seen, the way she communicated with her teammates entirely in eye contact and hand signals, the way she helped a girl from the opposing team up off the wet grass after a collision and then immediately stole the ball back from her, all in the same fluid motion. The way she was when she played so utterly and completely herself, that watching her felt like watching something that had been calibrated with tremendous precision and zero compromise. Ethan noticed Olivia leaning forward in her chair. He noticed her grip tighten on the thermos when Sophie nearly broke through on goal and was cut off at the last second. He noticed her exhale, a genuine, unguarded exhale, when Sophie threaded a pass through 3 defenders that hit her teammate's foot in stride, perfectly weighted, and the teammate drove it in. "That was her," Olivia said, pointing. "That pass. She saw that." "She sees everything," Ethan said. Olivia turned and looked at him with an expression that was so transparent for one unguarded moment that he felt he should look away. But he didn't. He held it. He let her feel seen. "Ethan," she said. I know, he said. She turned back to the field. Her voice, when it came again, was controlled, but only just. I have a meeting Tuesday that I don't want to go to. Okay. I also have a thing on Thursday that I could move. Move it, he said. I'm not asking for permission. I know, you're telling me. Move it. A pause. I don't know what I'm doing, she said quietly, underneath the noise of the sideline. Yes, you do, he said. You're just not used to doing it without a plan. I always have a plan. I know. He watched Sophie take up her center mid-position after the goal, bouncing on her heels, reading the field. The plan is the same as it's always been. You just didn't know you had it. She was quiet for a long moment. What's the plan? Show up, he said. That's it. Just keep showing up. A short silence. Then, very quietly, almost to herself. That sounds terrifyingly simple. The load-bearing things usually are, he said. Sophie scored in the second half. It was a left-footed shot from the edge of the box that went low and just inside the post, and the sideline erupted, and Sophie turned and ran, not to her teammates, not to the coach, but directly toward the sideline, directly to where Ethan and Olivia were standing, and she pointed with absolute unambiguous directness at Olivia. That one was for you, she shouted. Olivia Cross, CEO boardroom forcewoman who had not been rattled by an international financial audit or a hostile takeover or 6 years of compounding heartbreak, pressed her hand over her mouth and did not cry. She held it together with everything she had. But her eyes were bright, and Ethan saw it, and he didn't say a word. Sophie ran back to her team. The game resumed. Ethan reached over without overthinking it and covered Olivia's hand with his for exactly 3 seconds. Not a declaration, not a move. Just the simple, grounded human gesture of one person telling another, I see you. You're okay. She didn't pull away. After those 3 seconds, he moved his hand back, and they both watched the rest of the game, like nothing had happened, and everything had. They won 3-1. Sophie's team celebrated with orange slices and a collective amount of noise that Ethan was pretty sure could be heard from the bridge. Sophie found them at the sideline with mud on her left shin and the gap-toothed grin going at full power, and she looked at Olivia with the frank satisfaction of someone who has delivered on a promise. I said I'd score one, she said. You did, Olivia said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were still a little bright. That was extraordinary. Sophie looked at her, then at her father, then back. Kids have a different kind of radar. Not adult social intelligence exactly, but something more primal. The deep instinct that tells them when the adults around them are good and when they're not, and what the air in a room really means. Sophie had been running that radar on Olivia Cross since the Thai restaurant, and whatever reading she was getting, she had apparently decided something, because she did what Sophie Turner did when she'd made a decision. She acted on it immediately, without negotiation. She hugged Olivia, just walked into her space and put her muddy arms around her and held on with the uncomplicated wholeness of a child who has not yet learned to ration affection. Ethan watched Olivia go absolutely still. Watched the moment where every controlled, defended, carefully constructed part of her didn't know what to do with itself, and then watched her arms come up slowly and hold Sophie back carefully at first, then less carefully, then with the quiet, desperate tenderness of someone who had needed to hold on to something for a very long time. Sophie pulled back. You can come to the next game too, she said. We play every other Saturday. She looked at Ethan. Right, Dad? Right, he said. Okay. She bent down to pull a piece of grass off her cleat. I'm starving. Can we get pancakes? Yeah, bud, let's get pancakes. Sophie ran off toward the parking lot, where 2 of her teammates were doing something inadvisable with the remaining orange slices, and Ethan and Olivia were left on the sideline in the diminishing crowd, and neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Olivia said, I owe you an apology. He looked at her. For what? "For the way I came to your site," she said. "I've been thinking about it. About what I actually did. I found a man who had lost his wife, who was raising a daughter alone, who was quietly carrying something enormous. And I walked into his life, and I tried to reduce him to a biological solution. I made you an object." Her jaw worked. That was a deeply wrong thing to do to a person, and I'm sorry. Not the business apology, the real one. He held her gaze. "You were desperate," he said, "and scared, and you only knew one way to operate." "That's an explanation," she said. "It's not an excuse." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He paused. "I forgive you." She seemed to absorb that. Just like that. "You showed up to a kid's soccer game in 40-degree weather with a thermos and got my coffee order right without asking. We're square." She stared at him. "That's not Olivia." He looked at her steadily. "I forgive you. Take it." A long pause. Then something moved through her face, moved and settled like a weight being set down somewhere permanent. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." He nodded. "Pancakes." She looked toward the parking lot, then at him, then at Dana, hovering at a diplomatic distance. He watched her, calculating it, the departure from routine, the absence of agenda, the unmapped territory of a Saturday morning with no board calls and no quarterly projections, and nowhere to be, except wherever she decided to be. "Dana," she said. "Yes, Ms. Cross." "Take the morning off. I'll call when I need the car." Dana blinked. In 6 years, he gathered this had not happened before. Of course, Ms. Cross." Olivia looked at Ethan. "Pancakes," she said. "Yes." They found a diner 4 blocks from the park that had red vinyl booths and a counter and a laminated menu that was slightly sticky, same as the Thai place, and Sophie ordered chocolate chip pancakes with whipped cream and a hot chocolate because she decided winning a soccer game meant she was allowed to have dessert for breakfast. Ethan ordered black coffee and eggs. Olivia ordered plain pancakes and fruit, and then looked at Sophie's chocolate chip stack when it arrived and said, "Can I have a bite?" Sophie wordlessly slid the plate to the center of the table. Olivia took 1 bite. "Those are exceptional," she said. "I know," said Sophie, and pulled the plate back. It was over eggs and pancakes and hot chocolate that had happened the conversation Ethan had not been anticipating, because Sophie, who had been processing things in the background with the quiet computational depth she brought to everything, decided she had waited long enough. She looked up from her pancakes and said to Olivia, "My dad told me your name is Olivia." "That's right," Olivia said. "And you run a big company." "I do." "And you came to his work and asked him something and he said no." A pause. Ethan set his coffee cup down very slowly. Olivia looked at Sophie with the careful steadiness of someone who recognized they were being questioned by someone who deserved a real answer. "That's right," she said. Sophie considered her. "What did you ask him?" "Sophie." Ethan started. "It's all right," Olivia said to him, not breaking eye contact with Sophie. She seemed to be deciding something. Then she said simply and honestly, "I asked him to help me have a baby, because I want to be a mother, and I've tried a lot of other ways, and none of them worked, and I was scared I'd run out of time." Sophie looked at her. "Why couldn't you just adopt?" "I could. I've thought about it. I think I'm still getting there. I think I was so focused on what I'd lost that I couldn't see the other ways through." Sophie absorbed this. "Was it sad?" she said. "When it didn't work, the other times?" "Yes," Olivia said. "It was the saddest thing that ever happened to me." Sophie was quiet for a moment. She took a sip of her hot chocolate. Then she looked up at Olivia with an expression that was so specifically uncannily Claire. The directness, the compassion wrapped in total unsentimental clarity that Ethan had to look at his eggs for a moment. "We don't have a mom anymore," Sophie said. "In case you didn't know, she died when I was 4. "I know," Olivia said quietly. "Your father told me about her." She was really nice, Sophie said. I don't remember a ton, but I remember she always knew when something was wrong before you said it. Dad says I got that from her. She looked at Olivia with those direct, clear eyes. You're lonely, she said. I can tell. Olivia said nothing. Her hands had gone very still around her coffee cup. It's okay, Sophie said, with the particular gentle matter-of-factness of someone who had grown up in a house where real feelings were handled honestly. We were lonely too, for a while. We're better at it now, but it took a while. She ate a piece of pancake. Dad's pretty good company once you get used to him. I'm sitting right here, Ethan said. I know, said Sophie. That's why I said it. She looked at Olivia one more time, and something in her expression settled into a decision, the same finality as the soccer strategy, the homework battles, the backpack inspection. The look of a child who has evaluated the data and reached a conclusion. I think you should keep coming around, she said. If you want. Olivia Cross looked at this 8-year-old girl in a muddy soccer jersey with whipped cream on her chin, and she said, I want pie, with a simplicity and a rawness that she had not used for anything in a very long time. Okay, said Sophie, and went back to her pancakes. Ethan looked at his eggs. He was not going to be emotional in a diner at 11 on a Saturday morning. He was absolutely not going to do that. He was a little emotional. He covered it by refilling his coffee from the carafe on the table and asking Sophie if she wanted more hot chocolate. And she said yes, and the moment passed and became something else, something ordinary and warm and quietly enormous, the way the most significant things often are. They were there for an hour and a half. Nobody was in a hurry. Sophie drew a diagram on a napkin explaining the offside rule to Olivia, who engaged with it as seriously as she would a quarterly report, and they argued amiably about one specific play from the second half, in which Sophie maintained she had been clearly onside, and Olivia, with zero soccer background and sheer analytical confidence, said the diagram actually suggested otherwise. You're wrong, Sophie said. You might be right, Olivia said, but I'd need to see the video evidence. I don't have video evidence. Then we'll table it for now. That means you think you're right. It means I'm open to being persuaded by facts. Sophie looked at Ethan. I like her, she said in a tone that suggested she was slightly annoyed about it. I know, said Ethan. When they finally walked out into the October morning, Sophie ran ahead toward where Ethan's truck was parked, and Ethan and Olivia walked slowly in the same direction. She didn't need him to slow down, and he didn't perform the slowing. They simply moved at the same pace, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world, which was its own kind of significant. I meant what I said in there, she said, about not knowing what I'm doing. I know. I want to try anyway. She said it to the sidewalk, not to him, the way you say things that cost something when you're not ready to hand them over directly. I don't know what that looks like. I don't have a model for it. I've never... She stopped. I've never let anything actually matter this much before. Not a person. I've never let a person matter this much. He stopped walking. She stopped beside him. Olivia, he said. She looked up at him. You don't have to know what it looks like, he said. I'm an engineer. I know the structure doesn't have to be finished to be real. You put the first beam up, and you see if it holds, and you build from there. She held his gaze for a long moment. And if it doesn't hold, then we figure out why, and we try again. He looked at her steadily. That's how you build anything that matters. You don't give up because the first version wasn't perfect. She was quiet. Then, you're going to be very hard to walk away from. Good, he said. Then don't. Down the block, Sophie had reached the truck and was now standing on the running board trying to see if she could touch the roof. Ethan watched her with the side of his vision while keeping the rest of it on Olivia. She looked at Sophie, then at him. And some last defensive structure, some final wall she'd been maintaining against exactly this came down. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way real things end quietly and completely. "Okay," she said. "I won't." He nodded. He held out his hand, not romantic, not calculated. Just an open hand, an offer of steadiness. She looked at it for exactly 2 seconds. Then she took it. Her grip was firm and warm and real. "Sophie's going to be impossible about this," he said. "She already is," Olivia said. "I find I don't mind." They walked the rest of the block to the truck, and she let go of his hand before they got there because Sophie was watching with enormous visible interest from the running board, and neither of them was ready for that conversation yet. But the letting go was different from before. It wasn't retreat. It was just timing. "Same time next Saturday," he said. "I'll clear my schedule," she said. "You have a board meeting." She looked at him. "I'll reschedule it." "Olivia, Ethan." She held his gaze with total calm. "I have spent 15 years scheduling my life around things that didn't love me back. I think I can move one board meeting." He had nothing to say to that. He thought that might be the most significant thing she'd said yet, and she'd said it like it was obvious. Sophie called from the truck. "Are you guys done talking? I want to go home and shower. I have grass in my shoe." "Coming, Soph?" Ethan called. He looked at Olivia one more time. She was already looking back at him, and her expression was different from every expression she'd worn on his construction site, or across a coffee shop table, or at the edge of a soccer field. It was the face of someone who has stopped managing the distance between themselves and the thing they want and chosen instead to simply want it fully with all the risk that entails. It was terrifying, that face. It was also, he thought, the most honest thing he had seen in 4 years. "Saturday," he said. "Saturday," she said. He got in the truck. He pulled out of the spot, and in the rear-view mirror, he watched Olivia Cross standing on the sidewalk in the October morning, her phone in her lap, her hand still for once, not texting, not scrolling, not managing anything at all. Just standing, just breathing, just being in a moment without converting it into something else. He drove 2 blocks before Sophie said from the back seat without looking up from her shoe, "Dad?" "Yeah." "I think she needs us." He checked the mirror. The sidewalk was empty now. She'd gone. "Yeah," he said. "I think maybe we need her too." Sophie pulled the grass out of her cleat and dropped it on the floor mat without ceremony. "Okay then," she said. "That's settled." And with the absolute finality of a child who has made up her mind, she put her shoe back on and looked out the window and said nothing else, because as far as Sophie Turner was concerned, the important things had been decided, and now it was just a matter of showing up, which, as her father had said, was all a plan ever really needed to be. The weeks that followed were not a movie. There was no single moment where everything clicked into place. No grand gesture that erased the years of damage both of them had been carrying. What there was instead was something quieter and more durable, the slow, patient accumulation of ordinary days shared between people who had decided without fanfare to stop being afraid of needing each other. Olivia rescheduled the board meeting. She came to the second soccer game and the third. She started texting Ethan at odd hours, not about anything significant at first, just things she noticed and didn't know what to do with the noticing. A structural detail on a building she passed on her way to a meeting that reminded her of something he'd said about load distribution. An article about childhood development she'd read at 11:30 at night and thought Sophie would find interesting. Small things. The kind of small things that mean everything because you don't send them to someone unless they've gotten inside your head and made a home there. Ethan texted back. Always. Not immediately. He was on a site until 4:30 most days, and Sophie's homework didn't do itself, but he texted back, and she started to understand that the slight delay was not indifference. It was just the reality of a man who was present to the people in front of him before the people in his phone. She found to her surprise that she respected it deeply. She also found that the waiting, which she had always converted into action in every other area of her life, felt different when it was him. The waiting felt like something worth doing. 3 weeks after the soccer game, she had a crisis. Not a business crisis. A personal one, which was worse because she had no protocol for it and no team to deploy. It started with a phone call from her doctor at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. She was in the back of the car on her way to a dinner meeting, Dana driving the city, sliding past the windows. The call lasted 6 minutes. Her doctor spoke carefully, professionally, with the particular gentle precision of someone delivering information they know will land hard. The results of her latest assessment were in. The odds they'd discussed 18 months ago, the below 5% probability, had shifted, not in the right direction. She thanked her doctor. She ended the call. She sat in the back of the car and looked at the city and said nothing for a very long time. "Ms. Cross," Dana said quietly from the front. "Do you want me to cancel the dinner?" "Yes," she said. "Tell them I'll reschedule." "Of course." A pause. "Where would you like to go?" She opened her mouth to say home. The penthouse. The calibrated lights and the city view and the quiet that she had built specifically to be manageable. And then she closed it again, because she'd been going home to that quiet for 15 years, and she knew exactly what it felt like to sit in it with news like this, and what it felt like was unbearable. What it felt like was the particular cruelty of having a life so deliberately constructed against vulnerability that there was no room in it for grief. She picked up her phone. She called Ethan. He picked up on the second ring. She could hear the sight in the background, wind-distant machinery, the particular ambient density of a construction zone. "Hey," he said. "Everything okay?" "No," she said. And then, because she had spent 3 weeks practicing a different way of being, she said the rest of it. "I got some news from my doctor. About the pregnancy chances. It's not good news." Her voice was steady. She'd made it steady. But he heard something in it anyway, or maybe he just knew to listen for the things she didn't say. "Where are you?" he said. "In the car." "Dana's with you?" "Yes." "Give me 20 minutes to wrap up here. Come to the site. We'll sit in the trailer and drink terrible coffee and you can tell me." She exhaled. "You have Sophie." "Marcus can cover the last walk. Sophie's at her friend Jenna's until 6. Come to the site, Olivia." She looked out the window. "Ethan." "I know," he said. "Come anyway." She told Dana to take her to the Maplewood site. The trailer was small and smelled like sawdust and burnt coffee and the particular lived-in staleness of a space where men spend 10 hours a day doing hard physical work. There was a folding table and 4 chairs and a whiteboard with load calculations on it, and a space heater in the corner that clicked rhythmically when it ran. It was about as far from her penthouse as a room could be. She loved it immediately. Ethan was there when she arrived, still in his work clothes, hard hat, off a paper cup of coffee in each hand. He handed one to her and sat across the table and said, "Tell me." So she did. All of it. The call, the numbers, the specific language the doctor had used, the precise clinical way the door had been closed on the last version of the thing she'd wanted for so long. She told him without crying, because she'd been managing this particular grief for 6 years, and she was very practiced at the containment of it. But she told him everything, and her hands shook slightly around the coffee cup, and she let him see that. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone searching for the right thing to say. The silence of someone who understood that some things didn't need a response so much as they needed to be witnessed. Then he said, "I'm sorry. That's a real loss, and it deserves to be called that. It's not—" She stopped. "I had time to prepare for it. Statistically, it was always likely." "That doesn't make it not a loss," he said. "Preparing for something doesn't mean you don't grieve it." She looked at the whiteboard, the load calculations, the neat, precise columns of numbers that described how much weight a thing could carry before it changed. She thought about what he'd told her once, that the load-bearing things were usually simple. that you built from the first beam and you saw if it held. I keep thinking about something, she said. Sophie asked me in the diner if I'd considered adoption, and I gave her this answer about still getting there, about being focused on what I'd lost. She paused. I've been thinking about that answer for 3 weeks. Ethan waited. I think I was lying, she said. Not to her, to myself. I think the real answer is that I was terrified. Because adoption means loving a child who didn't begin with you, who has their own story, their own loss. And you have to be enough for that. You have to show up completely as yourself, without any of the biological shorthand. There's nowhere to hide. She looked at him. And I've spent 15 years hiding. He held her gaze steadily. You stopped hiding the day you told me you ate dinner alone in a penthouse you designed to impress people you don't like. That was an accident, she said. Best kind, he said. She almost smiled. I want to look into it, she said. Adoption. I want to do it seriously, not as a backup plan, but as an actual choice. The real choice. She took a breath. I wanted to tell you because... She stopped. Because I realized that the reason I wanted to tell you is because you're the person I tell things to now. And I wanted you to know that. He looked at her for a long moment. The space heater clicked 3 times in the quiet. That's the most important thing you've said to me, he said. I know, she said. That's why it took me a minute. He reached across the folding table and covered her hand with his, the way he had at the soccer game, steady and grounded and completely without performance, except this time he didn't move it after 3 seconds. He left it there. She didn't pull away. Ethan, she said. Yeah. I need to say something, and I need you to not be gracious about it. I need you to just let me say it and respond to it honestly. Okay. She looked at their hands on the table, then at his face. I love you, she said. I know it's fast by the conventions of these things. I know we've known each other for less than 2 months, and most of it has been highly unconventional. But I am 44 years old, and I have been alone for 15 years, and I know what it feels like to be in a room with someone and need them to leave. And I know what it feels like to be in a room with someone and need them to stay. And I need you to stay. She held his gaze. That's it. That's what I needed to say. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. The site was going quiet outside. End of the day crews packing up the particular settling sound of a working space going still. I'm not being gracious, he said. I'm telling you that I've been in love with you since you told me you moved your chair so you wouldn't have to watch people navigate around you. Since you ordered mango sticky rice and made a mess of it on purpose because Sophie said it was okay. He tightened his hand on hers slightly. Since you sat in a diner and told an 8-year-old the truth about the saddest thing that ever happened to you because she asked, and she deserved a real answer. He paused. I love you, Olivia. I'm not in a hurry. I don't need it to look like anything specific. But I love you, and I wanted you to know that before you walked back out of this trailer. She held his gaze for a long time. Then she looked down at their hands, and she took a breath that was slightly uneven, and she didn't try to make it even, because she had decided to stop managing those kinds of things. Okay, she said. Good. We're agreed then. We're agreed, he said. The heater clicked. Outside, someone called a last instruction, and a truck engine turned over. The day was ending. I'm going to pick up Sophie, Ethan said. Come with me. Ethan, Sophie will want to hear about the soccer rematch she's been planning for Thursday. She's been working on a theory about Olivia's left side being a weak point defensively. I don't have a weak left side. You do. She ran a diagram. She's 8. She's right, he said. Come pick up Sophie with me. She looked at him. At this man in work clothes in a sawdust-smelling trailer with terrible coffee and a whiteboard full of calculations for things built to hold weight, and she thought about what he'd told her 3 weeks ago on a sidewalk. You put the first beam up, and you see if it holds, and you build from there. The beam had held. "Okay," she said. They picked up Sophie from Jenna's house, and Sophie, upon seeing Olivia in the passenger seat of Ethan's truck, opened the back door, climbed in, and said, "Did you know your left side is weak?" "Your father told me your theory," Olivia said. "It's not a theory," Sophie said. "I have a diagram." "I'd like to see the diagram." "It's at home. We're going home, right, Dad?" "We're going home," Ethan said. "Olivia's coming." "Olivia's coming," he confirmed. Sophie considered this with her head tilted to one side, then reached forward and patted Olivia's shoulder twice with the definitive satisfaction of someone checking an item off a list. "Good," she said, and looked out the window. That night, for the first time, Olivia Cross sat at the kitchen table in Ethan Turner's small, modest house and helped Sophie with her homework. Not because she'd planned to. Not because there was a framework for it or a protocol that covered it. But because Sophie had spread the homework across the table and looked up and said, "Olivia, do you know anything about fractions?" And Olivia did, as it turned out, know a significant amount about fractions, and that was that. Ethan made dinner. Nothing elaborate pasta, a simple tomato sauce, the kind of meal that a working man makes on a weeknight when he's tired, but he wants something real. The kitchen smelled like garlic and basil, and the particular warmth of a small house with people in it. And Olivia sat at the table with a child explaining denominator rules. And something about the evening was so different from every other evening of her life that she had to stop twice and simply breathe it in. After dinner, after Sophie's homework was done and the dishes were dealt with, Sophie announced that she wanted to show Olivia the diagram, which turned out to be 3 napkins taped together with a hand-drawn soccer field and a series of arrows in different colors, indicating with genuine and somewhat alarming tactical insight the defensive patterns Olivia had displayed at both games and the specific vulnerability she had identified on the left side approach. Olivia studied it for 3 full minutes with complete seriousness. Then she said, "You're right, but I'm compensating by reading the angle earlier. If you approach from outside the box instead of cutting in, then you shift the angle and I lose the lane," Sophie said immediately. "I know. I was thinking about that. But if I fake the outside and cut anyway, then I'm already committed to the shift and I can't recover in time," Olivia said. "That's actually very good." Sophie beamed. "I know," she said with the specific immodesty of a child who has put the work in and knows it. She started collecting the napkins. "You can use that against me if you want. In the game Thursday. Just to see if it works both ways." "I'll do that," Olivia said. Sophie looked at her dad, then at Olivia, then at her dad again. She did the thing she always did when she'd processed all the available data and reached a conclusion. She said it directly without preamble. "Is Olivia going to be around a lot more?" she asked. Ethan looked at Olivia. Olivia looked at Sophie. "Yes," Olivia said, "if that's all right." Sophie nodded. One firm final nod. "It's all right," she said. "You can have the mug with the blue handle. That's the good one. Dad always uses the brown one." "Soph," Ethan said. "I'm just saying she can use the blue one." Sophie said, gathered her napkins, and went to put them on her desk. Ethan shook his head. He looked at Olivia, and she was looking at him, and they were both for a moment undone, not dramatically, not with tears or declarations, but in the quiet, private way that people are undone by joy when they have spent a long time not expecting it. He walked her to the car later. Dana was there, patient, discreet, as always, holding the door. The night was cold and clear, the first real cold of fall. "Sophie gave me the good mug," Olivia said. "That's her highest honor," Ethan said. "She hasn't let anyone use the blue mug since Claire." Olivia went still for a moment. He saw her understand the weight of that. He also saw her receive it not carefully or strategically, but directly the way she'd been learning to receive the things he offered her. "Ethan," she said. "Olivia." I'm going to make mistakes, she said. At this. I don't know how to do all of it, the showing up, the being part of something that isn't organized around me. I'm going to do it wrong sometimes, and I need you to tell me when I do. Same goes, he said. I'm serious. I know, so am I. He looked at her steadily. We'll figure it out. That's the deal. We don't need to know how it ends to start building it. She held his gaze for a long moment in the cold. Then she reached up, not hesitantly, not with a plan, and put her hand against the side of his face just for a moment. A simple human thing. The kind of touch that is not romantic exactly, and not romantic, but is simply the reaching of one person toward another, because the distance between them has become unbearable. He covered her hand with his. They stood like that for a moment in the dark, outside his small house in the neighborhood, where he had built his quiet life, with the sound of Sophie moving around somewhere inside, and the particular cold brightness of a fall night over the city. Then she lowered her hand. She looked at him. Her eyes were clear and direct, and there was no armor in them. Thursday, she said. Sophie's game. Thursday, he said. I'm going to use the fake outside cut, she said. Full effort. She wants to test it both ways. She will beat you, he said. She already knows where you're going to be. Then she'll beat me, Olivia said. I'll learn something. He smiled. She looked at his smile for a moment, like she was memorizing it the way you look at something you want to carry with you. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Olivia. She got in the car. He stood on the sidewalk until the taillights turned the corner and disappeared. Then he went inside. Sophie was in the hallway in her pajamas, pretending to have been on her way to the bathroom and not watching through the front window. I wasn't watching, she said. Sure, he said. I wasn't. Okay, Soph. She padded past him toward her room, and then stopped at the doorway and looked back, and her expression was the one she almost never showed. Not the soccer player face, or the homework battle face, or the I have a theory face, but the one underneath all of those. The quiet one. The one that held everything she didn't say, because she didn't yet have the words for it, and which he could read anyway, because she was his, and he had spent 8 years learning the language of her. Dad, she said. Yeah. I think Mom would have liked her. He held very still. I think Mom would have said she needs people around her who know how to stay, Sophie said with the particular accuracy of an 8-year-old who had inherited Claire Turner's preternatural ability to see the thing inside the thing. And I think she'd be glad that's us. He crossed the hallway in 3 steps and hugged his daughter, and she let him, which she didn't always anymore because she was 8, and sometimes 8-year-olds had opinions about hugs. But she let him this time. She put her arms around him and held on for a moment. Then she pulled back. She looked up at him. I'm still going to beat Olivia on Thursday, she said. I know you are. Good. She went to bed. Ethan stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then he walked to the kitchen. He looked at Claire's photo on the windowsill, the wild hair, the laugh, the light. He didn't feel guilty. He hadn't for a while now. What he felt was something more precise and more generous than guilt. He felt grateful. Grateful for what he'd had, and for what he'd kept the daughter who was Claire's best argument that love, when it's real, doesn't end. It changes. It grows. It finds new forms the way water finds new channels, because it was never capable of stopping in the first place. He picked up the mug on the counter. The brown one. He put the kettle on. He thought about Olivia Cross, sitting at his kitchen table explaining fractions. He thought about her hand against his face in the cold. He thought about her saying, I love you in a construction trailer, without looking away, without a strategy underneath it, without a single clause or condition, just the raw, unprotected truth of a woman who had finally decided that being known was worth the risk of being known. He thought about Sophie's napkin diagram. He thought about a soccer field in October drizzle. He thought about a wheelchair with a carbon fiber frame and an Americano ordered without sugar, and 2 words in a text message, "Thank you," that had cost more than she'd let on. He thought about load-bearing things, about the structures that hold, about the fact that the most important beams are never the ones you can see from the outside. They're the ones buried in the foundation, invisible and essential, carrying everything above them without asking to be noticed. That was what this was. He knew that now. Not a transaction, not a solution, not a carefully managed arrangement with pre-planned exits. It was a foundation being laid quietly in the ordinary hours of ordinary days by 2 people who had learned the hard way that you cannot build anything real on the outside of your own heart. He poured his tea. He sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of his house, except it wasn't the same quiet as before. It was full now, even in the silence. It was the quiet of a place that had people in it, even when they were sleeping, even when they were across the city, even when they were just a text message and a Thursday morning game away. Sophie was right. The important things had been decided. And Ethan Turner, who built things meant to last, sat in his kitchen and understood with the particular bone-deep certainty of a man who knows the difference between a structure that will hold and one that won't, that this one would. This one was going to hold.